Hello, this is Alejandro Bratti from Believe in Yourself, Believe in Your Business, and welcome to the Spanish World Network on Single TV channel 250 and 251. Please remember to download both the Single TV app on the respective app stores on iOS and Android devices. While you download, make sure to rate and leave a comment. The app is free. Single TV is available in Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Roku, and all smart TVs. I am really happy and thankful for having you, Soo Young, here with us today. I know that this is going to be very different from anything that you have seen in the past. So that's why I'm excited. Today is going to be a very good show. So thank you, Sue. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, maybe that preface is a necessary thing because I think, yeah, what I do is a little bit outside of the box. I'm probably also outside of the box. So very excited to chat today.
Yeah, exactly. So you are going to see different things that are very unique that Soo Young is doing. So we are going to be exploring that. But first, well, let's start with what you are doing now. And then we are going to go back in your life to some stories of how you were before you believe in yourself. And then that is going to lead us to understand more why you are doing what you are doing.
Yeah, thank you. So right now, what I'm doing is I have two focuses. One is my Multiverse Consulting. That's my company name. And it's basically about pathways to potential. And in a very untraditional way, I use multiverse theory and quantum jumping as part of my coaching and consulting model because I truly believe that all of us have so many chances to make decisions that actually change our life. We hear this saying a lot where people say you're like one decision away from the best life or your best partner or your perfect job. And that's absolutely true. But I also think this happens on an everyday level. That every time you have a chance to make a choice, which thankfully most of us you can make a choice towards your potential, which is where you want to be, where you want to grow and evolve, or you can make a choice towards your personality. And I know personality is kind of a word that might be kind of positive, but I use it more in the context that your personality is actually your past, right? When you say, well, I have a really hard time, like, speaking in public, or this is just me, right? These are the trappings of personality that actually keep you from doing the things you want to do. So I use that model as well as quantum jumping, which is kind of playing with like, what would your best, highest version do in this situation, right? Because unfortunately, about 60% of our actual decisions are from our subconscious space. So what we consciously want and what our subconscious holds are two very different things. So one beautiful way to play with the subconscious and kind of feed it the stories you want is play. It's imagination. So I use the quantum jumping in that model.
And I know we are going to discuss a lot about that in the second half of the program because I really I am interested on that, how you are doing that. It's very unique and different, so I love that. So let's go in your life, start to think. I know that you are coming from Korea, but also tell me a little bit of uh, any time when you were there, when you moved to the States, I don't know, or when you had your kids, any time that you think that you were not believing in yourself, and how was that process, and how were you when you were not believing in yourself, like any situation that you had like that.
Yeah, well, just a quick background. I was born in Korea, raised there, came to the US when I was 5, but my mom would send me to Korea by myself in the summers to make sure I didn't lose contact with the language. So for me, communication was very important, and to be able to kind of navigate in both worlds is really important. But I guess the story that comes to mind at the top of my head was I was in my mid 30s. I had my first son when I was 25. And in my mid 30s, and I was skateboarding since I was 18. And I'm skateboarding with my son. I'm a street skater, so I'm not used to like doing kind of tricks I was learning how to carve a bowl, within a cement bowl. And I fell really oddly. But the way I fell, when I grabbed my shin, my bone was sticking out of my leg. So I
Wow.
had two severe breaks and one fracture. And that completely shifted my life because I was in the midst of a divorce. I was in finishing up, 1 year of intensive Buddhist psychology. I didn't have insurance, right? So all of a sudden, I needed massive surgery, huge bills. Didn't have the support. Actually, even my family, my parents, they were so mad that I broke my leg skateboarding that they like kind of were like, cut me off in terms of communication and any support. But what I found at that time was I was very depressed because I couldn't work. I couldn't even hold my son's hand walking down the street because I had to use crutches. And just everything that I knew about myself completely kind of crashed. That personality really crashed. But what I had to do was find a way to make a living. I had to find a way. At that time, there was no really that much remote work. So what I was doing at the time, I decided I was writing for a best of the web. This is very early in the internet process. And they paid me like maybe $10, $20 per article. And I would just write all day, just write these, any how-to articles that I could. But it was still such a blow to my self-esteem that I really felt like every day I could sink lower.
Mm.
When it shifted was someone had reached out to me and asked if I would do a spoken word for a fundraiser. And I was like, sure, of course. It's great to be on stage. I can't quite walk very well, but I can do it. And something happened in my body when I thought about being on stage, standing still, and doing what I always do, which is, reading or public speaking. And I got into this mode. It was one of those points where I had these two decisions: do what I usually do, personality, or what I really wanted to do. And there was this little voice that said, you want to dance on that stage. You don't want to do spoken word. You want to dance. You want to move your body because you've hardly moved your body for about 6 months. So I said to the producer, could I please audition as a dancer? And they're like, sure. Like, do you have dancing experience? I was like, no, no dancing experience. But I
Wow.
feel like I want to tell a story with my body so badly that if you could give me this chance, if it doesn't work, I'll go back to the spoken word. And so I created these two stories, both of kind of the dark space I was in and the breaking out. So there were two very different songs and choreography. I auditioned and they're like, oh my God, we love it, you know? So I was like, okay, so I'm gonna perform. The problem is I can't walk very well, but I can dance. So getting on the stage is a little hard, but they're gonna give me a little more time. And Alejandro,
How you can dance if you can walk very well?
so walking is like this, right? But when your leg is broken, it tends to pronate to the side. So you can move like in circles, like you can float, but it's the straight that's really hard.
Oh my God. Okay.
Yeah. So I performed. I mean, I felt like something was breaking open, like a thunderstorm inside of me. And Alejandro, it was amazing. After that, I've got flown all over the country to perform. People were
Wow.
like, can you do this fundraiser? Can you do this? I started performing at, art galleries. It was just something I had always wanted to do since I was a child. Like that, taking that chance from like, what if, which is kind of worry, to why not? It changed my life.
And tell us a little bit more about, because one thing is like, okay, I have to do this. Then the next step is you start to think in your mind like, okay, but I prefer to dance, even when I don't know how to do it, but I have to dance.
Right.
That's the second step, and because it's in your mind, it's still in your mind, it's like, okay, it's okay, I can dance, and it's fine, I can dance with my head, I can be the best dancer in the world. But how was the process from that thought to really doing it, like really being in front? I know that in the process, I don't know how many days you had from that thought to really being in front of the audience. But what were all the struggles that you went through when you, even if it's one day or if it's 1 month, how was the whole process? Like, no, my leg is going to broke again, and because you have this little like devil and angel telling you like good things and bad things. Tell us a little bit about that story that you had in your head.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. So I don't see it as like the devil and angel. I see it as, again, personality and potential, right? So, like for me, personality, I knew that I could do the spoken word really well. I knew I have experience. It's very familiar. It's something I've done a lot of times. But given the situation, my body did not want to be still. So it was almost like a message from my body before my mind. And they say the body doesn't lie. And I think that's absolutely true. Your body will always tell you, even if you're like, oh, yeah, no, this is great. But then you get like this tightening in your stomach, or like your chest kind of feels uncomfortable. So I learned from dance, the body will always tell you. So the body was like, kind of like this nervous energy whenever I thought about doing the spoken word. So I listened to the body. And then when I listen to the body, the voices that come they're less thinking. They're more from your intuition, right?
Mm.
It's that potential. It's like that thing that's out there that's like that little tiny shining star. You're like, what is that thing? But you actually have to be curious enough to listen. And the voice was like, you want to dance. You want to dance. And then I was like, but to what? How am I going to do this? I knew I could dance better than walk because part of my physical therapy was I would go dancing. I would go to the clubs and go dancing because I knew that helped, create that flexibility and that strength. And I felt more comfortable on the dance floor than like walking to the dance floor. So I knew that. So I had that kind of sense of confidence and ease, but it was absolutely the sense of trust. I'm going to go towards the why not the what if. And that's very important in all of our life decisions, all of our daily decisions is to go with not the what if, which is worry and concern, right? You can still have them, but don't decide from that place. Decide from why not, right? So once I did the why not, and they said, yes, you can audition, then I really got to work on the story. And that was so exciting for
and
me.
and I want to go a little bit deeper in that part that you are talking about, listening to your body, because really, if that's something that it's difficult for people now to understand, like, okay, yeah, I have butterflies in my stomach, but that means that I don't want to be like, and people that it's in public speaking, they can be with the butterflies every single time that they are going to do the public speaking. But
Right.
okay, let's do it. So it's like I am listening to my body that this is I'm becoming nervous about presenting. Suddenly, like 5 minutes later, I am like in the middle of what I love to do, and I am happy, and I can do it, and that's fine. But
Right.
those, but if you're listening to that butterflies, you can be like, okay, maybe I don't have to be doing the public speaking. So how you learn to how to listen to your body to understand that it's telling you no, it's not that, it's the other thing. Like how you start to develop that skill for you.
So I think that's a really important question because I think there's a misconception that when we are doing what we really want to be doing, meaning kind of that inner impulse to find meaning, to put ourselves out there, that it should be easy. And I don't think that's true. I don't mean that it should be backbreaking hard and you should be like, whipping yourself to like do it. But we're always going to meet resistance when we do something new. It's just part of our, neurological programming that what's safe is what was familiar. That's more of the old reptilian brain. But
Yeah.
then there's this prefrontal cortex that's like all about new and experiencing and art and meaning. And so again, there's like two sides, right? So I think the problem is when we experience discomfort, whether it's the butterflies or anxiety or how like okay, you want to go to the gym, and there's all these voices, oh, but it's so cold. You know, it's like, why don't you stay home? We think those are messages to not do it. And I don't agree. I think there's going to be resistance. That's resistance that is, it's tough. You're breaking through your edges, and just go towards that resistance. But then there's a different kind of resistance, or kind of a gut feeling like, no, this isn't right. That's different. But the resistance, that's actually, you have to pierce through that to get to do what you want. You actually have to go in the direction of it. So, like with public speaking, when I coach people to do public speaking, I say, do not ignore the butterflies. Do not ignore the anxiety. Say, oh, yeah, I feel that, right? But this means that I'm doing something I haven't done before. And that is exciting. That is me not staying in the familiar. It's going a little bit out past my edges. I'm learning something, I'm doing something new, and then speak on that. Because, public speaking isn't about getting it perfect. It's really about this, like, being authentic. So
Yeah.
if you can say something like, wow, I'm really excited to be here, and I'm feeling butterflies because this is something I've always wanted to do. You immediately have that connection, because how many people can relate to having butterflies around public speaking?
Mm.
So I think it goes back to that space of, like, reading the messages with the context of, there's going to be resistance. Do not deny it, investigate it, but still go forward in what you want to do.
And something that comes to my mind also when you're talking about this is learn how to be conscious about everything. Because one thing is like I can be living the whole day and just like life is happening and that's
Right.
it. Or I can be like breathing and even feeling that breathing and understanding, okay, now it's going deep and suddenly I am connecting inside of me. Or I am taking lunch with my kids and I can be with my cell phone and yeah, whatever you say, and you continue like checking whatever, or you are listening to actually what they are saying and being present. So
Yeah.
that's what I am understanding of what you are saying about like listen to your body. Is when you are really present, you can start to notice like, okay, my body is telling me now that it's nervous, but it's exciting, or my body is telling me I am nervous and you should not do it. Like
Yeah.
stop doing that. So it's like, and when you learn to do that, when you learn how to be present and you learn continually how to be present and understand that being present is something that you have to to practice. It's not something that happens in one day.
Yeah.
But suddenly you can understand like, wow, I can know that this thing that is happening in my body can mean something. I haven't seen it before or feel it before, but I know that I have to follow that gut feeling. That's just to complement what you were saying. So in regards of, I love that story that you are bringing, because that opens also the door for what you are doing now, the multiverse. And this is for me is like talking about like or even the quantum jumping is like, let's talk about the future and how things are coming in the future. So tell us a little bit of what are you doing with that, and how are you doing that.
So I just implement that to my various coaching and consulting projects and clients. So, sometimes I have clients, for example, I work a lot with women who have trauma in their, childhood, and that obviously will affect some of their interactions, in relationships or in the professional world. And so let's take an example of that. So you have this past history, which is personality, that informs kind of what you're holding and how you are doing things. So even if consciously my clients feel like, yeah, I'm empowered, I feel like I've worked through this, there still might be something very deep that they're holding. I kind of liken it to the story, and we've talked about this, that let's say, you're walking through a crowd, right? And then someone says, "Hey, beautiful." Like, do you look back? Or if someone says, "Hey, stupid," like, do you look back? So again, the body might respond, even though you might not think that you're holding the story of being attractive, unattractive, whatever. But in that place is we look at what's being held, and the way you can tell what's being held is the conflicts in people's lives. So I have this client right now. She's incredibly intelligent, very empowered, but she still has this story that she doesn't have a true voice. So when she's working in situations of people with power, whether it's a manager or she's in a relationship and she feels like this person earns more than her, we see what the personal history is, we see what they're holding, but then we use the quantum jumping. We look at potential. So it's like deprogramming, right? Knowing what the program is and then deprogramming, and then doing the work of like, all right, let's play with what is the superhero version of yourself? What is the life that you want to be living that you imagine, could happen right now? So if you step into you, the person who is living the job that she wants, how is she doing it? How is she speaking? What is she wearing? What is the way, like, what is her posture? And there's all these different ways that you can kind of like jump into that character, right? Not only during this session, but also whenever she's feeling anxiety. Say that she's at a meeting and she's like, "Oh my gosh, it's my turn to talk to the board," or whatever. Okay, 2 seconds before, jump into that. Jump into that space of, the meditations and the imaginations we did with your highest best self. Because your mind, your subconscious mind doesn't know the difference. It's like when you imagine a lemon and your mouth starts salivating. When she gets into that space, she doesn't have to trick herself. She's actually just there by letting her mind step into the imagination of all the trappings of that person, of that version of herself.
And do you use any type of anchoring when you are doing that?
Yes, absolutely. So every session usually starts with breathing and some movement, even if it's just like upper body. And then when we go into it's not hypnosis, but it's like a meditative state where they can kind of step in and imagine there's an entrance and then there's an exit. So that's really important.
Okay, perfect. So that is, and that's why I was telling at the beginning, like this is very interesting because it's like, okay, I do coaching, but thinking about like being in a multiverse now that this is very common in Marvel movies and other movies that are appearing, is like start to, that's very unique. Like start to think like you have different characters and you can be that person that become the superhero for something. So in your life, how you have been using that?
So I do a meditation, I would say probably every other day, where I step into the highest version of myself. Because otherwise, just working on kind of the mental level, I feel it's very hard to make consistent progress because it's just one level. We're also body, we're also emotion, we're also kind of spirit. And for me, doing these meditations, they're usually about 10 or 12 minutes where I can listen to something or I can kind of get into just with some kind of background music. Okay, I'm going deeper into kind of that alpha wave where I'm more open to different ideas. And then I imagine these areas of my life where I wish I made a different decision. And then I imagine, what would I have done? What would I have done? So I've been working with, I was a professor for about maybe 12, 15 years in English. And I was also publishing at the same time, publishing essays. And there's a part of me that regrets that I didn't actually just stay with publishing over academia, because that's more closer to my authentic dreams. And so I actually go back to that place when, in New York City, when I was teaching and I was also publishing and making different decisions, and how that felt, what that version of me did. How did she continue to publish more and teach on the side, and then develop a niche to actually publish books? And then whenever I'm sitting in front of my desk and I'm like, I'm about to write, I step into that version. I step into the habits that she's developed in that lifeline. So it's, for me, it's really like a way that I can get all the levels: mental, emotional, somatic, the body, and kind of the spirit, into almost a playful mode of like, how do I overcome this obstacle? Because if I only use my mind and I'm like, okay, I'm going to make a schedule, I'm going to be productive, it's very ephemeral, it's very short lived. I'm not believing it with my whole being.
And if we start, okay, let's start to think like I am part of the audience, and what are the things that I can like take advantage of this? Like, what are the things that I can start to? Okay, there can be phobias. There can be what other things I can start to understand that this is going to help me to really excel, and and maybe before that understand a little bit of what is the best version of ourselves, how we connect with that best version, like, because sometimes it's like, no, this is my version and that's it, and I am this person, and why you are talking about a best version if I am being the whatever. I don't want to say anything, but I am not what I am expecting. I would love to be this other person, but right now I am not that person. So how you start to overcome all the thoughts that you have? And I know I am becoming like that because that's part of what I do also with the coaching, but I want to understand that from your point.
Yeah, I mean, so I think there's two ways that you can kind of use the model or the systems that I use. One is kind of it's an easy shortcut version, and I call it the why not versus the what if. So especially when you're coming across, I would say, the larger decisions, right? Whether it's like taking the leap to, ask someone out and have a relationship, going towards a shift in job change, or going for a project that maybe is not what you're familiar with. Just to hold those two frameworks, it's kind of like the two, right? You've got personality, which is the past. That's like, what if this happens? Oh my goodness, like, what am I going to do? Right? It's concern and worry. The other is potential, right? This is connecting to the multiverse. It's why not? Let me explore it. Like, what's the worst that can happen? So, with those two frameworks, if you can kind of imagine them on your shoulders, like you were talking, take the time to pause when you have a chance to make a decision that's going to impact the bigger things in your life. Just slow down and pause, because the pause allows you to have that awareness that you talked about earlier, where
Yeah,
you're not just an automatic pilot, right? And
exactly.
in the pause, if you can listen to which is what. So you'll probably have both sides, all the worries that come up. You'll also be like, oh my gosh, this is so exciting. I have no idea what's going to happen. Because usually the why not takes you where it's the unknown. You just don't know. And that can be scary. But if in those situations you can go for the why not with a frame of mind that, if nothing else, I'm going to grow from this, right? Not to have a set ending. I had no idea that dancing on that stage, limping on there, would lead to that. But I knew it was an authentic choice for where I wanted to go, somewhere I hadn't been before. It's kind of like Star Trek, right? It's like the last frontiers of your life. So that's one way. That's a very simple way that you can do it.
Mm.
But honestly, to go deeper, where you can kind of step into those aspects of your higher self, you really have to spend time in that imaginative world.
Mm.
You have to, do the meditations where you look at those crossroads in your life. You have to like, have these playful, like, even if it's like, okay, I'm going to dress up today. What am I going to wear? I'm actually going to wear something that's like that highest version of myself. Or how am I going to speak? So to do that, I think you need the meditations. You do need kind of, I like to use free writing, where I give my clients a chance to just 15 minutes, I give them a prompt, and then they just write without censorship. And that's another way to speak to your subconscious. Like, what would you do in this situation if you were not afraid of the outcome? And then they just write. And then they have something already in their body, in their mind of like, oh, this is what I do. And then they can step into that more easily. So there's a twofold practice. There's the more depth where you're actually visiting and imagining and playing. And then there's, the everyday choices, just holding the why not versus the what if.
And I love that. Like understanding that difference is very good. And the other thing that I wanted to talk, you already started to talk a little bit about that, but in regards of this part of what happens if I am not good at visualizing or imagining things, is like I know that there is a lot of people that they don't know how to do that, and it's like suddenly like you're telling me to imagine and I don't know what to do. Even everything, all my whole world is black, like how you
Right.
start to help them. So for me, what something that you started to say, like there is some type of people that writing is so very important for them, that can help them a lot. What other things you can tell them to start to, like, okay, don't worry, it doesn't matter if you don't visualize, you can hear, you can sense. What are the things that you tell your customers?
Yeah. So the other aspect of my consulting is also something that I call unschooling. One thing is I learned that from homeschooling my son. All of us learn very differently, right? So, of course, there's a lot of people where visualizing meditation is not going to be something they connect with. So, using any of the senses, right? It can be smells, like imagining what would be like the perfume you'd wear, you
Mm,
know, and
mm,
like having that, putting that on, smelling that, and like just tapping into the emotions that come with that smell. It can be music, like I love this idea of like a soundtrack for, your highest self. That's something that we also work with is like, what is your playlist when
mm,
you are that version of that life? Maybe you listen to this when you get up, maybe you listen to this to like relax, but there's all the senses are completely available to tap into this higher self, or it's playing. It's really a way of playing because the subconscious really responds to you playing. That's why children are so in tune, because they're always playing no matter what they do. We want to get back to that kind of state. And I think one thing that I want to say that's really important is they can be little steps. It doesn't have to be a huge goal of like getting the perfect job or the right relationship. Every choice you make can be a little bit closer to where you want to be. So if you're really depressed and you feel like there's all these factors that are just weighing you down, like one choice, like I'm going to eat this instead of that. I'm going to sleep earlier than later. Again, it's those two sides, right? Um, Past versus potential. So, yeah, I want to say to anyone who's listening that these tools can start working no matter what situation you are, no matter what your goals are, how big or small, because really it's just a mindset. It's not an app, it's just really working with your body, your mind, your emotions, your spirit, which is what we all have.
and everything start with your mind, and everything start with what you are thinking and creating with your mind. And if you're not creating anything, somebody else is doing it for you. So at the
Yeah.
end, that's the important thing here, and that's why I love this conversation that we're having. It's It's like how to be awake, how to understand with little things that we are saying, how you can become your best version. And something that comes to my mind to understand also is, for example, when we are talking about this different version of myself, and maybe what I can start to think is what happens if I am creating like different faces, and suddenly like I don't know who I am anymore
Mm,
because I created different faces. How to avoid that, because that's one of the things, like, okay, people is tired of creating different faces for different situations. So it's like we are not talking about that, but I want to work and talk a little bit more about that to avoid that, because I know that that's one thing. We are not talking about create different faces for different situations, because suddenly you are going to be lost, like, oh, who am I don't know. It's like, oh, but Alejandro and Soo Young told me like I have to create different versions of myself, and it's not exactly that.
yeah, no, that's a really beautiful and important point. Because yeah, I think things can be misunderstood when there's not a real in-person dialogue. So it's important to remember it's you. So each time you imagine and you play, whether it's in meditation or writing or whatever the senses you're using, it's the most core essence of you, not anyone else, not who your parents want you to be, not who your partners want you to be. It's really this very inner directed process, right? So it's kind of like removing all the blocks to you as a child. Like
Mm,
if you look at pictures of yourself as a child, oh my gosh, you can see your power. You can see that clear, crystalline essence of who you are. So when you're imagining, you're just putting yourself in a place where you had this crossroad and you wanted to do what you really felt pulled towards
mm,
versus what held you back versus what was expected of you from outside. So if you can kind of use that as kind of the core, paradigm, that you're looking at you with all the choices that you would have made authentically for yourself, with kind of in hindsight, right? You had the beauty of hindsight to say, oh, that crossroad was actually something I wanted to do this. Or what would it be like if I had chosen this? And the highest self is still you, right? And we can access that all the time. We can also access kind of the familiar, the defaults, the automatic pilots. And I do want to say it doesn't mean it's an opportunity to be hard on yourself when you don't, step into the highest choices, because it's all part of the learning process. And I think what happens lots of time in personal development is as people make progress, they feel so good, right? But when things don't go their way or they feel like they're working from their default, they're very hard on themselves. They beat themselves up, they feel self defeated. But actually, that's just more of what's going to keep them in place. If there's
yeah.
a mistake, just to be like, wow, I take responsibility and this is the effect of that choice. And then I know I can choose differently. It should be as light as that.
And understanding a little bit, I know that for me it's very important to explain what are the programs. And the programs is everything that we create in ourselves to do automatically. So anything that we create, even for like driving a car or doing different things, like you learn to do it automatically, and suddenly you are not thinking consciously to do it. Even for me, like take this this cup and start to drink, I am not thinking about like all the things that are happening and how I am going to drink and not fall. So there is a lot of programs that we create in ourselves to become our version and
Yeah.
do our life easier. But sometimes if we program ourselves badly, instead of helping us, is stopping us. And it can be with different fears, like, okay, fear to success, or fear to failure, or fear to public speaking, or the imposter syndrome, like different things that can come to your mind. that suddenly that's exactly what we're talking with your higher self. Is like that person that doesn't have all these fears and all these issues because you are being programmed, but it's exactly who you really are. And taking out that, suddenly you can take better decisions and start to forget about this person that is very programmed, and start to avoid those programs in yourself. So just complementing what you are saying, because I believe that connects specifically what you are doing. Uh, Tell us a little bit, what are the things, like maybe one or two examples of the biggest challenges that you have had, that you have helped people to realize and improve through this process.
So I think, one thing is like right now I'm working with a client to help um, take a raw manuscript. So I'm working as a writing coach, but still using the same systems that I use with the multiverse, a manuscript into publication form. And what I find is, early sessions, he kept saying, but I'm not a writer. I'm not a writer, and I'm like, at some point, I was hoping that there was a sense of like, how does that feel for you to say you're not a writer, but, we're working on a book together, right? You are a writer because otherwise you would not put the energy, the time, the financial commitment to do something like this. So I really take like what is possibly holding him back. And it can be shown in these little statements as, I'm not a writer, you are the writer, you are the expert. And really bringing it back to like an awareness of, can we pause a little bit because you just said this? And I think that thing that you're holding will probably impede some of the potential with where you want this book to go. Because I'm not writing this book for you. I'm not your ghostwriter. I am your book shepherd. I am your writing coach. And unless you can step into the highest version of where you want this book to be, because he has amazing dreams and goals, and I see the potential in them. Let's look at that. Let's use, you in this version of your life, where this book is going to go. Let's play with that. What do you imagine on your tour? You
Mm,
know, what kind of audience? Like, what do you want to do? You want to do public speaking? Do you want to have courses? Do you want to reach out to all these people who are struggling with these things? It's, I have to keep it somewhat confidential, but this idea of like these little things we say and do, they leak out the stories we're holding that hold us back, right?
mm,
And my job is to kind of be the spotlight, like, ooh, what was that? Can we look at that story? Can we look at why you said that or why you did that? Now we know it's there. Alejandro, we have to know what's there to work with it, right?
yeah,
It's there. So it's no longer in the subconscious. We've pulled it up.
yeah.
Now we can work with it and we can dispel it. So the antidote for that is let's step into the excitement of talking about when this book is released and you're doing the book signings, you know, you're like meeting with all these people, you're talking to the press. What does that feel like? And just even now, as I'm speaking, I'm getting goosebumps because that is the bodily imagination of you stepping into that. It's like the lemon. Your
Yeah.
body knows no different. Your mind knows no different. So that's a very specific case of someone that I'm working with right now of how to use this context.
And that is very powerful, because at the end we can know exactly like what you are saying. Oh, imagine it. That's exactly what we are talking about, imagination. Start to see yourself being the person that is in front of anybody, or and doing everything that you are saying. So that is wonderful. Tell me how people can connect with you, how they can know more about you, what are the things that, who is the right people for you. I know that when we're talking about coaching, like anyone can do it, but really, who is the type of people that you like to work with?
So, and people can find me through my newsletter on Substack, my LinkedIn, Twitter, any of my social media. They're happy to accept DMs. I love working with people in transition. And what I mean by transition is when they're at a place where they realize, well, this aspect of my life, I want to change, but I don't quite know how. And it can be anything from the transition of a raw manuscript to a book, to someone after a divorce or end of a relationship, health issues, they want to move. So, the transitions are the hardest places for us as human beings, but they're actually the place most rich with potential
Mm.
because we can get lost in the transition. It's kind of like you go into a new job or new relationship or new place, you always take yourself, right? So you can actually take the transition and stay in your default mode, which is your past. Or you can say, I'm in this transition because I want something to shift. I feel it with my whole being. I want it to shift. And then I would love to come in. And it's not like I'm an expert or guru. I just want to come in with the spotlight. I want to spotlight what's blocking you. I want to spotlight your tools that you already have and use the tools you have to transition into your potential.
Mm.
So I love transitions. It's like
Awesome.
exciting for me.
You're suddenly excited about that. Yeah. So I love it. So thank you very much, Soo Young. Today has been really amazing. And for me, we talk a lot of things at the same time. You were like, this is going to have a lot of time. So, do you want to say one thing, like if people doesn't remember everything that we talk, but you want to say a little bit more about the what if and why not, what are the things that you want people to remember? Like, okay, if you forget about everything in the show today, this is the thing that I want you to remember.
I think responsibility is so huge. It creates the biggest impact. So if you can navigate through your day with a sense of responsibility, which means, let's say that, you slept very poorly and you feel horrible the next day and you're really grumpy, right? Which is usually me when I don't sleep well. Instead of being like, oh, like I did it again, or like, why, and just being frustrated, go back to cause and effect, which is what responsibility is. What caused me, what decisions I made to get here? Well, I worked too late. I stayed up watching a show. I worked out too late. The beautiful thing about taking responsibility and using cause and effect is you're like, oh, I can do it differently next time.
Mm,
And that is the tool. It's that empowerment of knowing how important every little choice is because they have an impact. So I think responsibility absolutely takes you away from the victim mentality where you feel like life is happening to you. If you take responsibility, it's like life is happening for me because I can choose toward my potential. I can choose to, go to why not versus what if. And yeah, for me, responsibility is like it's the golden key to understanding the cause and effect, you know, that we have in our lives. And it's very empowering. It's really gives me kind of this lens of like trying to see, what I can choose and how that has an impact. But it also makes me super excited. Even if something goes wrong, I'm excited after some time because I'm like, oh, I can see what contributed to me having that happen and I can do it differently.
yeah. Awesome. So I really enjoy completely the session today, and anybody that has been with us, you know that Soo Young was amazing today. So thank you very much. It was really really good, and I want to start to play with my subconscious now. Like that's what I feel about this meeting today. So it was really really good. So everyone that is listening to us today, what we are, we continue doing this. The believe in yourself, believe in your business. That is the key for everything. Start to believe in what you want to do. So this show can also be heard on the Spanglish Radio Network. Please check out SpanglishWorld.ca for all the news and programming. Spanglish World, watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and leave it. Thank you, Soo Young.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much for
everyone.
having me. Thank you, everyone.